Welcome to Birthing Purpose with Lana. Today we have Bridget Thompson. She is an author, writer, designer. She has 25 years of marketing and communications experience. And she just launched her book called Trust Yourself with Money.
Hey, Lana.
I've been anticipating this.
Me too. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yes, because I got a lot of questions, and this is a good topic because especially in a time like this, with the pandemic, unemployment, just all this, all people are in some desperate situations, and some people have actually been blessed financially during this time, and then others have not. So I thought this was just like a great time to really dive into money matters.
Absolutely. It's a very personal topic for everyone. Everyone's affected by it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about your journey to birthing this book. So, how did this all come about? What made you say, I want to write a book about money?
I wanted to write this book for a while. And I think the seed of this book really started for me 4 years ago. Well, a little more than 4 years ago.
Okay.
I was in the process, I talk about this in chapter one of the book, of just the process that I went through after the 2008 recession. It was not as dramatic a time as this because obviously this pandemic is in a class by itself.
Yeah.
And we can't exactly compare the 2008 recession to what we're experiencing now financially. But for me, it was a very dramatic time. And I was coming out of that experience, which I'll talk to you about a little bit later. And I was reading this article about 4 years ago. And it was an article called The Secret Shame of Middle Class Americans.
Hmm.
And it was an article in The Atlantic. And the author of the article, Neil Gabler, he started off the article with this really shocking statistic that only 50% of Americans could come up with $400 in savings.
Hmm.
And I was really surprised by that and taken aback by it. And I think that statistic just kind of lodged in my head. It made me feel like I needed to get myself together even faster than I was already doing.
Okay.
And it also made me feel a sense of curiosity, compassion, um, empathy, community, et cetera, with all the other people who I didn't even realize were also struggling with having something on hand, having money in savings.
Mhm.
And so as I started to kind of crack the code for myself, I really wanted to share details with other people. But it took a while because I had a lot of work to do in my own life. Even though
Mhm.
I felt like I had figured a few things out,
Mhm.
I still had work to do. I was climbing my way out of debt when I first got this idea.
Okay.
And I think writing the book after getting out of debt was different than writing the book while I was still kind
Yeah.
of scratching and scraping and trying to figure things out. So that's how it came about. I just had this idea in my head that as I learned how to kind of work through some of the problems in my own life, I wanted to give a cheat sheet to people
Hmm.
so that they could save a little time as they're navigating similar issues in their own lives.
So, in all of your research and your own experiences and things like that, is there one thing that you think of is the big culprit as to why people just can't save?
One thing, well, here's the thing that's top of mind for me. And this, I think in my head anyway, it's kind of like there are people in the world who are just natural savers. I think we all know people like that. They're 5, 7 years old. They got their little piggy bank. They're just naturally doing that. And then the rest of us, or some of the rest of us, don't really have that. And I never really had that natural saver type of gene. So for me, I I think one of the biggest things is this notion that, well, there are a few things. It's hard to pick one, but the thing that's top of mind for me is there's this notion that, well, I can't save because I have this other thing I need to spend my money on. And in my book, I call it a competing priority. It's not a bad reason to spend money. It's a great reason to spend money. An emergency, an unexpected bill, something that just comes up that really requires your attention. And for me, what I would do is I would save up money and I would, do all the right things. I had a savings account, I put money in there, but then I just go and crack it open and take the money back out whenever something came up. And I think that was a big challenge. I think that's a challenge a lot of people have.
So your mindset, changing your mindset about maybe your needs and wants.
Yes, it's what I suggest is in that moment where you're challenged with this competing priority, this other thing that you really need that money for, slow down in that moment and be willing to push back. Be willing to have a conversation with yourself. Be willing to ask yourself questions.
Mm.
So, for example, I don't know about you, but I've had situations where I've spent down to $18, $25. Like I've had situations where I've just not had any money, to really do the things I wanted to do. And I had to kind of crawl my way back out of that situation. And there came a point where I asked myself, if I'm willing to figure out how to move forward after I've kind of burned everything to the ground, and after I'm here with practically nothing, what's the difference between that and asking the same questions and navigating my way forward when I still have something left? So for me, everything was always on the table. Everything was available to be spent. And that was a big part of the problem. That was a big part of the challenge.
You talked about some little kids have their little savings and things like that. Do you think
Yeah.
maybe it was the way you were raised? Because for me, I was raised save, save, save from a little girl. And I've done the same thing with my son. I even, sent him a little program to the library that taught them how to save. You put money for savings, little money for offering or tithe,
Yeah, tides
a
and all
little,
that.
how to do your little bills, and it was a cute little program for the kids. And as soon as he was born, I had a savings account for him, and he's been saving ever since he was little. So, um, how you think that does have an impact on people if somebody teaching you how to save and
I think,
when
I
you're
was,
little,
I,
when you grow up with
I
those?
was, I was taught how to save, how to pay tithes, how to pay off, give offerings in church, all the right things. My mom drummed into my head, save, 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 save.
Hmm.
My
Hmm.
mom, I laugh with her now because after writing this book, I just said to her, I remember when you used to say, even if it's only $5,
Yes,
Bridge,
that's what I
just
was taught.
save.
Yes,
I
it was
mean,
my book.
she told me that repeatedly.
Hmm.
And yet I have my own mind, my own being, my own way of making sense of the world, my own journey. And I had to kind of learn through my own life what I needed to do. So I think that it's kind of like if a parent gives their all to a young person, to a child, and they expect that child to do exactly what they said, they may end up being a little disappointed because ultimately that child is going to get older, have their own experiences, and have their own mind. And maybe they'll come back like I did. I'm now 50 years old, coming back to my mom saying, "You were right about everything, mom."
So how much of the
But
world is a pressure then for people like to have this stuff, have all these things?
yeah, I think we're in
Society
a,
playing a pressure, influencing people to just buy, 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 spend, spend, spend because you got to have this, trying to have that status, trying to just.
well, think about it. Think about how we're conditioned to go into debt, right? It's presented as a benefit. Oh, lucky you, you get to spend money you don't have. Oh, lucky you get to borrow money. Oh, lucky you get a
And
credit
if you
line.
can't pay it back, you could just file bankruptcy and start all over again.
Well, yeah, and that's a whole other
That's
thing.
a whole nother thing,
But
right? Because I see people play that game. They buy, and then
but
they file bankruptcy and they
that's
start
how
all over.
right. And I really
Game.
feel like that's how we're conditioned. I mean, when I was back in the day when I was in college, they were set up on college campuses, kind of waiting to get us in their clutches. And I'm sure it's even worse now. It probably starts even sooner now. So
Yeah.
I just think that we're living in a society in general where you're right. We are all about consuming, but even so, we're also not really conditioned to be honest about what we can do, about the limitation of our own means.
Because of
And
the image, right? You're trying to portray this image.
maybe it's an image for other people, maybe it's an image for yourself. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, sometimes I was embarrassed not to be able to have the money to do some of the things that my friends were doing or that they thought I should be able to do. And writing about that in the book was like, oh yeah, it's still kind of painful, embarrassing, challenging to really hold up a mirror to yourself
Mhm.
and to say, okay, where am I not being in integrity in my own behavior, in my own life, in my own choices? And frankly, I think it's a very courageous thing for anyone to do. Everyone has his or her or their own shortcomings. And to really make progress and become someone who's a kind of non-saver and crossing over the line to becoming someone who knows how to have and keep money in savings, you do have to look at yourself in a way that can be really uncomfortable,
Mm,
you know?
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. So in your book, you give a cheat sheet on how to go about this.
Yeah. And I have exercises. My favorite exercise is an exercise I just came up with out of necessity. And it's one of the primary things I describe in detail in the book. I talk about saving money as building a muscle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, when I was trying to figure out how to save money and I was kind of clicking around and Googling around,
Yeah.
I found a lot of articles that said, oh, get a second job, get a third job, get a fourth job. And that's all great. It does help to get more money in the door if you're trying to save.
Right.
But as I mentioned, my problem wasn't just that I was trying to get more money. It was like once I got the money, I would just crack it open and use it and spend back down and then start up the cycle all over again. So I had a different kind of challenge, which was how am I thinking about my choices regarding how I'm spending my money? So the exercise I came up with was it was a deceptively simple exercise, but it turned out to be profoundly powerful. And the exercise was at the time I had very little money, very kind of sketchy income and intermittent income at the time. And I just decided I'm going to keep $30 and I'm going to keep this money in my line of vision. I'm not going to hide it from myself. I'm not going to put it under a mattress. I'm not going to put it in a separate account. I'm going to keep it right in my checking account where it's available. And I'm going to decide not to spend that money.
So discipline. Teaching yourself how to
Yes,
be disciplined.
yes. But it's also about, yes, it's absolutely about building a kind of discipline, but it's also about acknowledging that you have choices.
And the power to choose right and make the right decisions too.
Yes, yes, make decisions that will benefit you.
Right.
So I found that when I did that, as I started to slowly add to that money, the pull to spend it got stronger and stronger as the dollar amount got larger.
Hmm.
And I found that interesting too.
You know, I find interesting, the less money I have had in savings, the more I spend. No, really, I'm opposite. And the more that's in saving, the more I'm like, mm-mm, I'm not. It's weird. I'm, it's so weird. The more money I have in there, the more I'm like, nope, I'm not spending. I'm not spending. I'm not spending. And then if something like major happens, and then it goes less, then I start.
Panicking?
I don't know, not panicking, but just spending more. Like, okay, well, I'm already spending this amount. Just keep going, just keep
Well,
spending. Like
that's the
something crazy.
point.
But then when it is weird. I don't. How much? Okay, so what do you think a person should have in savings? Like, what is the general rule that you should have at least this amount in savings?
Well, I talk about that in my book, and I have a kind of unconventional opinion about it.
Okay.
I started off in a lot of debt, and I was a huge Dave Ramsey follower and fan.
Oh, yes.
And I listened to Dave Ramsey's podcast for like a maniac, probably for like 2.5, almost 3 years, every day, just just listening, just brainwashing myself. And so I understand that there are rules and people have different opinions about how much you need or how much you shouldn't have. But honestly, what I say is it's really important to understand your own financial ecosystem. And in order to do that, you must keep records. Whether you are, a lot of people hate that idea that they have to keep records. But for me, it was really transformational to start to record what I was spending every day, what I was taking in and when, how much money I was getting in, what my needs were, what my desires were, my wish lists,
Okay.
all of that I detail in the book. And so my belief is that once taking, you've been kind of keeping your own records for a while, you will know if 6 months of expenses feels a little heavy or if it feels a little light. Not everyone's life is the same. Some of the suggestions people make about how much to have is based on the idea that you'll need a certain number of months to find a new job in case you lose your job. That's the rationale
Mhm.
behind saying you should have 6 months, you should have 3 months, you should have 8 months, maybe post COVID, you should have a year. But I really believe that those kinds of external suggestions can only go so far. So I would encourage, and I feel really passionately about this, I would encourage people to get to know themselves, understand how money flows in and out of your own life.
Mm.
And it's really simple. It's just keeping track of what you're already doing. I feel like this idea of competing priorities is very powerful because they don't go away. Life doesn't stop because you decided to save money. Things are still going to break down, things are still going to pop up. And the question is, how do I navigate those moments? And what I suggest is that competing priority is actually the weight that you're using to build the muscle. It's an opportunity. So it's like a 10-pound weight. It's like, okay, the tires, I had a blowout. I need new tires. What do I do? And I actually have a kind of suggestion of the kinds of questions you can ask yourself in that kind of moment. It's not so much that you will automatically, figure out a way to never have to touch your savings again, but you can process the situation so that maybe you won't have to touch your savings.
Or how
But
about you don't have to beg people for every time something goes wrong in your life? No, really. I feel like like if you have savings, then you don't need to bother other people when things happen to you, right? Because people have their own lives, their own finances, their own, and every time you turn around,
you sound like the saver who's getting harassed by the non-saver.
I'm just
Is that what's
like,
happening
what
here?
the heck? Like no, I mean, no, for real. No, but for real, like you deplete all your money, you blow up all your money, and then you go to other people who are saving, and then you're begging them for their money. You never. So I feel like at some point, God bless the child that has its own. You
Well,
need to
you
know
know
how to
what?
save, and so that you can be more independent and self sufficient, where you do not have to impose on other people's finances. That's their savings. They worked hard for that, and here you come.
Yeah.
Unless, I mean, I'm talking about abuse. I'm not talking about somebody that has a problem, like, but I'm talking pattern.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
always at the check cashing place.
Well,
You never have enough.
I don't see a big difference between that and someone who relies on credit cards. You're borrowing from some entity. Either you're borrowing from your friend, you're borrowing from your sister, you're borrowing from Citibank. At the end of the
But
day,
the difference is if I put it on my credit card, I can pay that off at the end of the month. And I didn't bother anybody. I didn't mess with my sister, my brother, or because they have kids, they have family members. I don't take from them. There's an organization set up to help them in those times of needs where
well,
they don't feel the weight of the borrow like your family members would, you know?
yes, but I also think that borrowing money in general obscures your understanding of how money works in your life, whether it's borrowing from a person you know or borrowing from a kind of faceless corporation who is just there for, really to, well, they're really there to take your money through interest, but whatever.
Right,
But
right,
I mean,
right.
I don't want to abuse is wrong, plain and simple. Okay, if someone's abusing a relationship with a person that they love and they think that that's okay, there's some work they have to do. But I'm also not really interested in shaming people because of where they are right now.
Right.
There's a moment of awakening that happens for each and every person.
Yes.
And everyone's on their own journey. And
Right.
so I really wrote this book for people who are waking up and looking for tools like, okay, I need to get it together here.
Right.
What do I do?
Right.
And they're looking for specific steps. They're
Yes.
not looking for a vague declaration like you need to save. Yeah, we know that already.
To do it.
But what do we do step by step? And that's really the purpose. That's really the dream I have for this book is
To
that
help
people
people.
who are searching for it will find it and they'll be able to take it and run with it. So yes, I mean, I am I'm not a big fan of debt, whether it's debt to your loved ones or debt to a corporation. I'm not a fan.
Right.
I've been debt free for a while now, but I also think that everyone has their own journey. Everyone decides what they want to do and how they want to live. The question is, are you living in integrity to the best of your ability? Are you living according to your values?
So I'm the kind that I tell people I don't lend money. I don't. If I give it to you, I'm sowing that seed. I don't want it back because I'm not gonna. I don't fall out with people. I don't even. I don't fall out with people about money because I don't expect it back because I sow it to them. That's
Yeah,
just kind of how I've done it. Um,
I love that. I think that
yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I had to learn that.
Yeah.
I didn't always have that. I mean, I messed up in my younger years, definitely with,
Mm,
like you say, they're giving you credit cards when you're young, and things like you don't know. You're just like spend, charge, swipe, swipe, things like that. So I definitely had to learn. But now it's like at some point in your life, you just don't want to keep going around that same mountain. And you just gotta, like you say, do the self-reflection,
yeah.
really take a good look at things and say, you don't need anything.
I
And
think
you
that, what's so interesting about what you're saying, though, is also, I think that as you start to take an inventory of
yes,
your own behavior, it's a natural extension to start looking around your physical environment and paring down and looking at the things you don't need
Mhm.
and really
Oh, I
just,
do a lot of that too, purging and
yeah,
taking things
yes,
to the
decluttering,
yes, and
and
giving
just
it away, and
you
yes.
want an environment with just higher quality, beautiful things, just less things.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having 10 kind of, lower quality things, you may just want one or two higher quality things. And I think
Right.
that's a natural outgrowth of kind of getting in touch with the way
Right.
money's working in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
like how you give the little cheat sheet and how you have people to do certain exercises in there to help them walk through it to come up with their own answers. You give them
Yes.
some answers, but some of it just depends on you and your situation because there is no cookie cutter way. And so,
I feel really strongly. I'm very anti-cookie cutter.
yeah.
I'm
Right.
I'm very anti-rule of thumb
Yeah.
because and this goes back to your question about, well, what did your parents teach you and what did you learn when you were young? I have my own mind. It's one thing to be told, do this, do that. And then you live your own life and you kind of make sense of things in your own way. And I think you have to honor that. I
Yeah.
think each person has to honor that. And so it's very important to look inward and to look at your own behavior and get curious about it.
Hmm.
And then you can make smart choices going forward.
Right.
And you can make really powerful choices once you know who you are
Yes.
and how you think.
Awesome. Awesome. So
Yeah.
hopefully this book will be a blessing for someone out there who just needs to get this information and make some changes because they just want to do things differently and they want to have a different outcome than historically that they've seen.
Yes. And
So yeah,
and I want people to know there's no time that's too late.
right.
So that's why I think it's so important to eliminate the shame
Mm,
that goes along with not having or
yeah.
not having figured it out yet.
Yes.
You don't need to be 22 with your whole life ahead of you to become a saver. You can be 50.
Yeah.
You can be 30. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just a decision to say, okay, how can I start to turn this situation around? And almost relishing the opportunity to do that and seeing the challenges in your life as opportunities for transformation.
Yeah.